All right, welcome back to Photoshop. So today we're going to take a look at a new series, or in this case, just a single video of how to get started using just the basics of Adobe Photoshop. Not everybody wants to or has the time to spend learning every aspect of the program. What I'm going to show you today are just the basics of how to use the program. So the first thing we need to do is we need to take a look at how the program is set up. And this can be confusing a little bit. Actually, I'm going to hit a quick key just to turn off my rulers to make this simpler. Now, how it looks or the program is set up depends on something up here on the top right-hand corner. If you click this, you'll notice that it says choose a workspace. By default, it will be under Essentials. And essentially what this is doing is setting up these windows and configuring them depending on what medium you are working in. You'll notice that if we click on this, we've got Essentials, 3D, which they're getting rid of, motion, painting, photography, graphic design, and web. So in my case, I'm a photographer. This might be a basic setup of how I use the program. All these little tabs that we see over here are different windows. These windows are activated over here under window. So anything with a check mark is going to be activated over here. Anything that isn't is going to not have a check mark. And in that case, I just added a check mark to brush settings. So that popped up. So that's everything right here is set up in window, and then they will be displayed over here on the right-hand side of your screen. So we have some rows or columns over here. So this is a whole row and this is a whole row. And within those, you can have tabs, meaning you can have other windows, and in each of these areas, you can have tabs. So notice I can click on the Navigator tab or the Histogram tab, depending on which one I want to show. If I wanted to move the Navigator to its own window, all you need to do is left click and hold and drag that down. Now that's going to put it in between those two sections. You'll see that blue line. I let go, it's going to put it in between. If I grab it and I come down here, it's going to put it in between those two. If I wanted to put it on this tab, I would come up here. Notice it makes the whole area blue. And when I let go, it puts it in as a tab. If I want to move this over here, I can do that. And if I want to make a new row, I can come over here and make that long linear blue line. And it's going to open up a third row. In this case, I don't want that, so we're going to close it. If you want to open or close these windows, you're going to go up here and click on those little double arrows. And that's either going to open or close it. It still gives you the simplified version of what each one of these little windows are. So this is actions. If I click on that, it'll just open up the actions. But this lets it configure it however you want. Now I have a very large monitor, so it makes it easy for me to have multiple windows open. If you want to make these windows smaller, you come out here and get that little double arrow symbol, click, hold, and either drag left or right to make things smaller or larger. So I can come over here and move that stuff to make it smaller or larger. I can come over here, click this one, drag this way or this way, depending on if I want something smaller or larger. In my case, I've made a custom setup. So we're going to go up here. I'm going to click on that. This is my custom setup that I've been using. I move these things around occasionally, but this is good enough. The main window that we're going to be looking at is this info panel. So if you don't have it up, you would go up here to window and you would come up here to info and you would make sure that's selected. The info panel by default is not set up like this. We're going to be working in RGB, and really what I want to read is K, which stands for black value in grayscale. To get that, all you would need to do is come over here to the little eyedropper symbol, click that. When you click it, it will give you the different options. So if you wanted to set it up as CMYK, it's CMYK. If you want to go back to grayscale, it's grayscale. What we want is grayscale. Then when you go over and read and you look back there, you'll notice it says 38%. And also on the other side, because it's in red, green, and blue, it gives you the red, green, and blue, a number system from 0 to 255. The next thing that I have is way over here on the left, and you can actually pull this out if you want, but I like it where it's located. Just like before, you can click on the double arrows up here and you can make it 2 rows or click on it again to make it 1 row. If you click the X, it will get rid of it. Also, if it just disappears, it's because you hit the tab. Actually, you want that blue line to put that back on the left side. That's the location that I like to use it. Now, my toolbar is set up custom. By default, your toolbar is either going to look like this in 2 rows or 1 row. This is the default toolbar. And you'll notice in the default toolbar, there's a lot of little areas with these teeny tiny little triangles right here. A little triangle there, a little triangle there. What that means is there's other tools underneath that location. So if I come over here to where I have a little arrow to this brush, if I click and hold, you'll notice I've got the brush tool, the pencil tool, color replacement tool, and the mixer brush tool. So those are all tools located underneath it. In my case, I don't like to have nested tools, and there's basically only a certain number of tools that I basically use most of the time. If I want my other tools, I can go to these 3 little dots and click here, and that will show me some of the other tools that I still have available. I've just kind of moved them out of a visible location over here. To configure that, what you would do is just go to Edit, Toolbar, and when you would click this, you get this window and it lets you configure it. Look, I have a whole video on how this is done. So if that's something that you're interested in, I'll try to post a link of that video so you have quick access to it. It should also most likely be in the description below. All right, so these are our tools that we use here. And I will just go over a few of these quickly and tell you what they are. In a little bit, I'll show you exactly what they do. So this is an important one right here. This is our move tool. This is the lasso. This is a freeform tool. And what the freeform tool does is just let you make a selection. It will make a little bit more sense here. This is the magic wand. This is not something that you're going to be learning. This is your crop tool right here. And those are the main ones that we're going to be looking at today is the move tool, the lasso tool, and the crop tool. So if you need to, you can take a few minutes here and kind of configure this how you want it. We're not going to be getting into a lot of these little windows over here because truthfully, what I'm going to show you today is going to be very simple. What's going to be helpful is the history and the info palette. So if you want to have those 2 up, those are basically the ones that we're going to be using. The history shows you a timeline of what you've done. So I've opened the image, I've cropped the image, I've flattened the image. Here's my image lasso. That's what I've done to this image. So we're going to go ahead and click back here on this guy, and you'll notice all I've done is open that. Down here we have, and this is my file size. So meaning this image, what it is in pixels per inch, you can change it to view other things. So if you want document size, document profile, any of this stuff, you feel free. I'm just going to leave mine on document dimensions right there. So if you're wondering what that was, that's what it is. All right. One last thing before we get started, and this is important. If you come up here to edit and you drop down to color settings, you actually need to set these up. The way digital photography works is we've created a set of standards. And what these standards are a way to calibrate your screen so that my screen and somebody else's screen in California look the same. What we basically use in photography are one of a few profiles: sRGB, Adobe RGB, which used to be called Adobe 1998, and Pro Photo. I use what we see right here, which is Adobe RGB, as my working space. So when I've got an image open, I'm working in Adobe RGB. It has a larger color gamut than sRGB. sRGB is the standard for working on the web. So if you're just going to be doing stuff on the web, you could easily just switch over to sRGB. I'm not going to get into the detail of that. That's not the goal of this video. There are other videos where I have more explanation on what color profiles are. What the goal is here is you need to set up what you want to work in. And in this case, I set mine up at Adobe. If you wanted to do sRGB, you would select that one. The other one to select, in this one, you just want to go ahead and change it because I think it's a dot gain 20%, but switch it to gray gamma 2.2. And that's just in the case that you're working in grayscale. You want to convert your color management policies all to convert by working. And if you click this little boxes right here, ask when opening, a little dialog box will ask, do you want to convert to this? And you'll always say yes. So we're going to go ahead and click that off. And then are your color settings. All right, so we are ready to go. So to adjust or work on a photo in Adobe Photoshop, you're going to do a series called adjustments. And there's two different types of adjustments. One's called destructive, one's called non-destructive. I'm going to be showing everybody the destructive way to work. Don't think of this as a bad thing. Everyone gets worried that I'm showing them destructively what to do. What that means is when you make an adjustment and you do something to it and you hit OK, it automatically applies it to the image. You can also do the same thing over here, and this is what we call a layered adjustment. We're not going to be doing layered adjustments just because it complicates things and makes life a little bit too difficult. So we're just going to show you a basic way to work. To do adjustments, there's a couple different ways. In my case, I'm not going to be using this adjustment box over here because this only works for layered adjustments. You're going to want to learn the quick keys for this, but I will show you where the adjustments are located. So if we come up here to image, click on that and we go to adjustments, then we can see them. So we have these, which are brightness and contrast adjustments. These are color adjustments. These do kind of fancier different things. And most of this stuff you'll most likely never use. The main ones you're going to be using are everything up in here. So we have brightness contrast, and that's simply going to allow us to brighten, darken, or increase the contrast or lower the contrast. If you don't understand what contrast is, it's basically making your blacks blacker and your whites whiter. We're going to go ahead and hit cancel. We're going to come back up here to image, adjust, and we'll go to levels. And you'll notice that levels and curves both have a little number associated with it. In this case, this is because I'm on a Mac. So that symbol stands for command. If you're working on Windows, it's going to be control. But in this case, the quick key is command L for levels and command M for curves. Now, why don't the others have command keys? Because you don't use them. Truthfully, I only use curves anyways. There's no reason to really learn all the different ones. A lot of students start out with brightness contrast because it makes a lot of sense and it's the simplest control. I'm going to suggest that you learn one and learn it well. That's going to benefit you more. And either levels or curves are what you should really learn. So we'll go to levels. So levels will bring out here just so we can see what's going on. So this is a little bit easier. And it's a little bit weird. So this is what we call a histogram. And a histogram shows where the data is in your image. So over here on the right are your highlights, and you can see we don't have any. Over here are your shadows, and right here are your midtones. This is actually not a midtone slider. It's actually called a gamma slider, but it's basically adjusting your midtones. So if we come over here, we're making things brighter. If we slide to the left, if we slide this to the right, it's increasing the contrast and making your blacks blacker. And this is making your midtones darker and your midtones lighter. It's opening up that image. Down here, we have two other sliders. So this is flattening out your image, and this is adding more gray to your highlights. And that's basically how it works. We have an auto setting. You can click auto. It will auto tone your image. Auto tone rarely works perfectly. Sometimes it works pretty good. One of the problems is it actually does color correction as well as brightness contrast, and sometimes it can screw things up. It really needs a black and a white in your image. If you don't have a black and a white, it's not going to work so good. So if you click this and it does something crazy, all you want to do is hold your Alt or Option key and you can hit reset. So that's Alt on a PC, Option on a Mac. And every time in this video, whenever I tell you a quick key or I'm using a quick key, it's going to pop up right here of what I'm using on both Mac and PC. So we can go ahead and hit cancel. This time we're going to go up to image, adjustments, and drop down to curves, which is my favorite because you have the most adjustment. Notice that we have the histogram right there. You always want to be working in light 0 to 255. This is for CMYK. It inverts the way this works. Never work in pigment ink. Right here is your auto tone, so you can click your auto tone just like you did before. I'm going to undo that, so I'll hit reset. And right here we have our curve. So this is our curve right here. This is going to be your highlights. You can either slide this directly to the left to increase your highlights, or you can also come down here. This is your highlight slider. This is your shadow slider. So I can either grab it here or here. So if I want to make my highlights brighter, I'll drag it over this way. If I want to flatten out my shadows, I can go up. If I want to increase the contrast of my shadows, I go to the right. So if I wanted to open up the shadows, which we see right here is on this side, I'm going to come down into the line where the shadows are, which is right about here. And if I lift up, it's going to brighten the shadow areas. Now, because it's a curve, it's arcing. So it's brightening all this area up as well. If you don't want to, you click and you set a new point and you can drag that down. So what this is saying is it's brightening this area up, and then right here it's flattened out and it's going to stay where it was before. So that's how you do it. Now, what you don't want to do is this. You don't make a curve like this. That's just a crazy curve that's never going to work. Usually a curve has 3, maybe 4 points at the most, and it's going to be very soft. I can come in here, I'm going to open up this and maybe bring this down. So we have this nice, soft, gradual curve. You don't want something like this because it's just not going to look good. Those are your curves. Now you can go into the red, green, and blue channel. This isn't something I'm going to talk about. It's too complicated for this video. What we're looking at is just basic adjustments. So if you want to brighten, you go up, darken, you go down. And you can do that at any point. If you set a point and you don't want a point, you click on it, hit your delete button, and that point will be gone. Just like in levels, if you adjust something and you don't like it, you can hold your Alt or Option and click reset, and it will be back to where it was. Right here, this is to set a white point. This is to set a neutral gray, and this is to set black points. This isn't something I do in Photoshop. And if you want to find out why, you're going to want to watch the longer videos. I'm not going to go into a long rant on why I don't use these, but there's a very logical reason. So once you make an adjustment, you would hit OK, and then it would physically apply that. That is what we call a global adjustment, meaning that when I make that adjustment, it affected the whole image. If you want to make an adjustment and just have it affect a certain area, you're going to need to make what we call a selection. And that selection is going to come over here from that lasso right there. Now the lasso has what we call a feather option. So by default, it's set at 0 in pixels. And I'll show you the two options and why you want to use a feather. So the lasso is very similar. It's a free form tool. Wherever I move my cursor or mouse, it's going to make a selection out of that. So in this case, I'm just going to make a selection right here. And notice that that doesn't have any feather. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to add 55 to that. I'm going to make a secondary selection by holding Shift on my keyboard and making a selection there. So remember, this is with a feather of 0, and this is with a feather of 55. Now when I bring up those curves and I make that adjustment and hit OK, you'll notice the selection with the 0 leaves a really harsh, hard edge. And the 55 blends it from 100% of the adjustment out to 0. So it transitions into the background much more seamlessly. So how does that work? Let's go ahead and hit Command Z to undo all this. And I'm going to zoom into the little guy right here. And we're going to first start with a feather of 0. And I'm going to make a selection. And I'm just going to do it real quick. It doesn't matter if it's accurate. You will see the effect here. And truthfully, in Photoshop, your selections don't need to always be so perfect. I'm hitting Command M, which is curves, to bring that up. I'm just going to brighten that up and hit OK. So when I do that, because this has a hard edge, you can totally see exactly where I lighten this little guy up. That's not something that we want to do. Now, if I take feather, and the feather is determined on the size of area that you want to make a selection on and the size of your image. This is a pretty large image, usually somewhere between 44 and 77. I'll do for a pretty large image. And then as you make a smaller selection in an area, you do need to lower it. So it is something you have to change. Come in here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to brighten this little guy up. And now you can see it's very difficult to see where the brightness started and ended because of the feather. You want that transition in feather to help blend images when you make selective adjustments. So the selective adjustment was using a selection tool. In this case, we're using the lasso, and I'm just going to circle the area that I wanted to brighten. So I'm saying, hey, this little sheep, I'm going to go up here to image, adjustments, curves. I'm going to just pick up in the middle and brighten that up. I can also add a little highlights if I want. I can hit OK. And just like that, I have made that adjustment. Now down here in the history, as I'm going along, you're seeing everything that I've done. So if I want to see what it looks like before and after, I can go to the deselect. I can come down here to this deselect and you can see that adjustment. So you can go back in time. If I wanted to go back to where I opened this image, I can just click on that. And now we're back into the beginning of time where I started. Your history only saves a certain number of adjustments, and you set that in the preferences. So you can go in there and set it. I think by default it's 50, but it used to be 20, I think. I'm not sure what it is. So these are the adjustments that we've made so far. If I wanted to come in here and I wanted to, let's say I wanted to adjust and brighten this grass as well, we could come in here and just make a rough selection, and we'll add his little head in there. And so now we've selected this area. I can come over here and use Command M, Command or Control M, and I can increase the brightness of the highlight areas to get those to pop a little bit. So what I did there, we'll go over that again, is I made my selection. I went to Image, Adjust, Curves, but you could use any one of these. I took my highlights and I made them brighter. You'll notice that this histogram doesn't start to right here. This is what we call optimizing the histogram, where I'm sliding it over to where the line starts because there's really no data here. And you don't usually want to go to right where it goes up because it makes it too bright. So I'm going to stop a little bit before as far as my highlights go, but that looks pretty good. And then I would hit OK. And now I've made a selective adjustment in this area. Now I'm going to go back in time, which is Command Z. Let's say I wanted to brighten this grass here, but not the sheep. I'm going to make this selection like I did before. And then I decide, you know what? I don't want the sheep to get any brighter. Well, when you're using your lasso here, we can make either a subtraction or an addition to a selection. To make a subtraction, you're going to either hold the Option or Alt key, so Alt on a PC, Option on a Mac, and you'll notice that your cursor in the center goes from kind of a target to on the right bottom, it gets a little minus. So then I can go around the sheep and deselect him. And I can deselect any area that I want. If I want to add to a selection, I'm going to hold the Shift key. And then you get the plus, come out here and you can circle the whole area where you want to add to. If I want to remove this little area, hold Alt or Option and circle the whole thing, and that will remove it. So now I've made a more accurate selection. I can hit Command or Control M. I can come in here, brighten that area, and just like that, I've made a selective adjustment. And you can see it's pretty easy to go in and adjust an image. And that's really all that you need to know. You can make a global adjustment where there's no selection and it adjusts everything in your whole image. Or you can make a selection and just what is inside of the selection will be adjusted. Now, the next set that we have are our color adjustments. So if we come up here to Image and we go down to Adjustments, notice that we have Vibrance, which will allow you to adjust the vibrance of an image and make it brighter, or lower the saturation, which is how much color. So 0 color to black and white to super saturated. And vibrance is just a little bit different than saturation. It's just making colors a little bit more vibrant. I'm going to hit cancel. So image adjustment, we have saturation, which is my favorite. And what this allows you to do is adjust the color of a color. I know that's confusing. By default, it's under master, meaning that if you make this adjustment, it's affecting all the colors we don't actually want to do. But we have three options. One is called hue. Hue is the color. Saturation is how much or how little of the color. And lightness is making the color brighter or darker. So the way this works is if you want to make, let's say I want to make the yellows brighter, I can go to yellow and I can increase the saturation. So anything that's yellow or has yellow in it is going to get more saturated. If I lower it, it's going to lower the yellows. If I want to make my yellows brighter or whiter, I go to the right. Darker, I go to the left. You're not usually making things darker. And if you want to change the color of a color, meaning if you want to make yellows more red, you can go to the left. And if you want to make the yellows more green, you go to the right. And you kind of have to learn for each color what it does. So if I go to the reds and I go to the right, it makes them more yellowish green. If I go this way, it makes them kind of more magenta-y reddish color. So you can adjust each color's color, saturation, and lightness. And you'll be surprised that in Photoshop, this is super helpful. That's one of the ones I use the most. Then we've got color balance. And color balance looks like something that you would use a lot, but truthfully, I don't. This lets you make global adjustments to color, and it's very simple. If you go towards the red, it makes everything more red. If you go this way, it makes everything more cyan. Remember, right now, because we don't have a selection, it's doing this globally. So green, magenta, blue, yellow. And you can isolate where it is affecting it. Right now, it's in the midtones, but if you wanted it more in the shadows, this doesn't mean that it's not going to be doing it in the highlights or the midtones. It's just going to be isolated more towards the shadows. And you can make those adjustments there and you would hit OK. Go up to image mode adjustments. Then we have an option to make something black and white. And this is your best option for making something black and white. You black and white. It's actually still an RGB color image, but we've just desaturated. But what this little window does is let you adjust whatever is red in the image. Make it brighter or darker. So if you want to make the areas that are red a little brighter, we can. If we want to make the yellows a little brighter or darker, we can. Anything that has green, we can make it brighter or darker. Anything that has cyan in it, blue or magenta, we can adjust that and then hit OK. Just to let you know, if you tone an image and it looks perfect in color and then you switch it to black and white, you're going to have to readjust it. What looks good in color does not look good in black and white. Usually it ends up being too dark. So for black and white, you're going to need to open your image up a bit. But that's basically it. There's a few other color adjustments there. We're not going to get into those because truthfully, they're not something that you use a lot. There are a shadow and a highlights area where it does allow you to open or adjust the shadows, highlights. Not a big fan of it, but if you like it, go ahead and try it and see if it works out for you. All right, so I've switched back to color. Now, just like we did before, when we were making a selective adjustment, you can use those with color adjustments too. So if I just wanted to make a section black and white, just there, whatever I've selected, it's going to make that black and white. So let's say in this case that I don't want the sheep to actually be black and white, but I wanted everything else. I'm going to show you an easier way. It's hard to select everything else. So let's go back in time. So I'm going to make a little bit more accurate selection. It's not going to be perfect. My feather's a little bit too strong for this, but that's okay. We'll make a selection. So right now, if I was to do the black and white, the sheep would become black and white, but I want everything else to be black and white. So how do I make that? Well, that's really easy. You want to select inverse, which is up here. You go select inverse, which is Command Shift I or Control Shift I. And so when you select that, it selects everything but, and then you would come up here and go adjustments, black and white. In this case, now everything but the sheep is black and white. So you'd hit OK. And whenever you have a selection, to get rid of the selection, you can just click in the selection, or you can hit deselect, which is Command or Control D. Well, that's it for the basic adjustments. Remember, you have global adjustments in which you adjust the whole thing. or you can have a selective adjustment where you select something and then you make an adjustment in Photoshop. Well, after you've made your adjustments in Adobe Photoshop, the next thing you're going to want to do is either crop or crop and save your image. So we will go into that next. All right, so the next tool that we're going to take a look at is the crop tool, which is right over here when you select that. And by default, it should show up as ratio. And what that's going to do is give you this kind of a little bounding box around it. And as long as there are no numerical inputs in these little boxes up here, you can do this sort of free form where you can grab a corner and you can crop this in any shape or size that you want. Now, this isn't resizing it, it's just cropping it. It's either just removing or hiding areas. You'll notice up here, it says delete cropped pixels, delete crop pixels. So what that means is if you have it unchecked and you crop it, if you click on the crop tool again, which is just clicking here, it didn't actually remove the pixels or the image, and you could get that back as long as you don't save this as a JPEG. If you save it as a JPEG, you kind of are screwed. You'll lose that stuff. But as you're working on it, if you make sure that this is not selected, you'll always be able to come back in and recrop it. So it's a good thing. If you have delete crop pixels up and you crop it, and then you click on the crop tool again, notice that those pixels are gone. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit escape. We'll use the history box to go back before, and we're going to uncheck delete crop pixels because we want to make sure that we don't lose those areas. So it's really easy. You click on the crop tool. You can either grab here to go up and down, left or right, any corner to come in and out. If you go outside of the box, you'll notice you get the little flippy flop arrows. You left click and hold, and you can rotate your image. So if you want to make your horizon line or any line straight, you've got a straighten tool. You can click on the little level. You click and hold and draw a line, and it will make that line horizontal, perfectly horizontal. So it's going to rotate the image. And now this line is perfectly level. So that's what it does. These are just different ways to configure the way this box looks. I think the easiest is just using the rule of thirds. So we're going to go ahead and hit escape just to get out of that so we don't do it. Now we can also change the ratio. So let's say you wanted to put stuff on Instagram and make everything a perfect square. You could change your ratio. So this is a 1:1 ratio. That's going to give you a perfect square. Now, if you try to make this rectangular, it's not going to let you do that, right? It won't let you go in on just one side. It's going to always keep this ratio the same. Same thing, if we wanted it to be 5:7, it's going to make this ratio 5:7. It's not making the image 5:7. It's just making the ratio 5:7. Any number that you put in here, it's going to do it. So if I wanted to make this 4:7, it's going to be a custom ratio, and now it's going to be 4:7. So you can make anything that you want. If you want to clear it, you hit clear. These are the ratios that are most commonly used. If you wanted to make a custom one, you could just go ahead and type that in. Now there's one other option. It's located right here. It's WH and resolution. And what that does is it will crop the image. It will change the ratio and size the image. So let's say I wanted to print this 5 inches by 7 inches. So in this case, my width would be 5. You always need to make sure you have what dimension you want. So space IN in inches. So we're going to make that 5. And then we'll make this 7. And now this is going to be 5 inches by 7 inches. So the ratio is going to stay the same, but it's also going to resize the image 5:7. So if I click on this and hit return, right here, the last number we have is pixels per inch, and you do need to fill this out. It makes a difference. Pixels per inch refers to the resolution of how well it's going to print. The higher the number, the better it's going to print. Usually nothing goes above 300 pixels per inch. Most printing is whatever your dimension is by 300 pixels per inch, but you can always check to see what your max resolution is and set that. So we'll go ahead and size that. I can hit return, and it's going to crop this image and size it. So I'll just boom, just like that. You can see it got smaller. If I hit Command 0, that will make the image full frame. And then I can go up to image size. And you'll notice if I go to inches, it's going to say that it's 5 by 7 inches at 300 pixels per inch, which is exactly what I told it to do. If we go and change this to 5 by 7, I want you to see the difference. So we're going to go ahead and we'll make this smaller. Now this is just changing the ratio. So when I do this and I go to image size, you'll notice it changed the ratio, but when I go to inches, it's not 5 by 7. It doesn't resize it. That's what the other one did that was different. Now, once you crop something to 5 by 7, you can go into your image size under image size, and manually do this. So I can say, hey, I want this to be 5 by 7. I'll just hit 5. It will automatically make this 7 as long as this box is selected. And I'll hit OK. And boom, just like that, it's 5 by 7 at 300 pixels per inch. So that's how you size your image. That is for print only. If you are sizing something for the web, you actually want to use a pixel dimension. For a pixel dimension, it's a little bit different. You're going to come up here, and in this case, when you go to width, height, and resolution, it doesn't matter what your resolution is in the pixels per inch. So that could be 5, 50, 100, it doesn't make a difference. What's going to make a difference is what you put in here, because you're going to change this. So if I want this to be 1000 and then pixels, PX, it's going to change that to 1000 pixels. And I can make this 3000 pixels high. Also, you want to get rid of the inches and type in PX. That makes a difference. And then I can hit tab, and that will give me, this is 1000 by 3000. And if I want to make it more square, I can make this a 2. And then I can come in here and I can select this and hit return. And this is going to now make it 2000 by 3000 pixels per inch. So when you size for the web, you use pixels. This is going to size it to 3000 by 2000 pixels. This number here has no effect on the image. So if we come up here and go to image size, notice if we go to pixels, it's 2000 by 3000. This has no effect. I know it's confusing for people, but pixels is a fixed dimension. So whatever you put in these two numbers are what it's going to be. So I could make this 1, all right? But as long as this is 2000 and that's 3000, the image is going to be the same size. So when you size for the web, you use pixels. And when you size for print, you use width times height times resolution, which was that pixels per inch. Now, once you've sized your image, the next thing that you want to do, and this is important, if you look up here right now, this image is at 43.2%. We want that number to be at 100%. The easiest way to do it is go to View, 100%, which is Command 1, right? So now we're viewing this at 100% because we're going to sharpen it. So what happens with a camera is it uses an anti-aliasing filter, especially with Canon, and it makes your image a little bit soft. So you need to go in and sharpen your image. And there's a couple different ways to sharpen. I'm just going to show you one. You go to Filter, Sharpen, Smart Sharpen. And the reason you want this at 100%, you can see right here, it's showing you at 100%, is so you can see what the sharpening is doing. All you need to really move is your amount. The higher the number, the more sharpening. The lower the number, the least amount of sharpening. Sharpening actually just increases contrast on the edges. If you're interested in what sharpening is doing, I have a whole video that goes into it. But basically, for an image this size, I would say I'm going to sharpen it somewhere around 40%, and that's about it. You can tell images will look really wonky if you over sharpen them. You'll be able to see it down in here where it looks just super unrealistic. The item is either black or white and just looks very, very unnatural. You can also see that in fur in here. So we're just going to do that. Now, what's important here is you always sharpen after you size. because the size of your image is going to be dependent on the amount that you use to sharpen it. What are those amounts? It's difficult. It just really depends. Usually I don't sharpen any more than 55 or 60% on a full resolution image. But as you make images smaller, like most web images, I do at a max of 2000 pixels, which is smaller than this. I usually have those around 20 to 30% when I sharpen them. So then you need to hit OK. And the last step is to go ahead and save your image. Now, what's new in Photoshop is what we call save as a copy. I'm not going to go into how to do save as. You want to go down to save as a copy, because unless you change some configurations, save as will not let you save as a JPEG. So we're going to go ahead and hit save as a copy. That's going to bring up a window here. This top window is going to allow you to change the name to whatever. So I'll call this whatever. All right. The next thing is to do the location. Obviously I'm on a Mac. It's going to look different on a PC. Let's say I want to save this right back to my downloads. I'll go ahead and do that. The format is going to be JPEG, not JPEG 2000, just straight JPEG. And once you've given it your name and have the correct location, you can also add a folder if you wanted. You can hit save. It brings up a second window. What's important is you always use baseline standard. The higher the number in the JPEG options, the better your image quality. Anything 11 or 12 is going to give you a really good image. I don't usually lower my JPEG to small file sizes. The internet's so fast, you don't really have to do that anymore. And if you're interested in JPEG compression and what it does, feel free to watch another video. But the easiest thing for a video like this, just have it at either 10, 11, or 12, and you'll be okay. So you'll hit okay. And just like that, your image is good. You're saved and ready to go. So you could close this out. So I can close this window, don't save. I can hit Command O to open it. We can go to our downloads. Here's whatever. I can click open, and there's our saved image. And that's basically it. That's exactly how you go through and save and adjust an image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the whole process one more time so it makes sense. And I'm going to tell you what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So I've got this image of this woman right here. And actually the background looks pretty good. I think I could open up, the contrast is a little bit strong in the background where we're not getting a lot of detail here and a little bit in her hair. That is going to be a global adjustment. So we would go up to image, adjustments, and pick one of these four. I pick curves. Now it's the shadows, which is this darker area in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open that area up a little bit, but I don't really want to open or brighten anything else in the image. So I'm going to make a second dot and pull this back down. And I'm pulling it back down to this faint black line that goes at a 45-degree angle. Now we've just brightened this area of the image, not any of this area. And we'll hit OK. And now it's not so contrasty in the background. Face is a little bit pinkish red. Part of it is because of the shirt she is wearing. So if I want to adjust a specific area, we take our lasso. We can go ahead and still use the 55 pixels. I can select just her face. And I have two options. I can do one, which is color balance. So I can go up here to adjustment to color balance, and I can adjust that color balance to get the face to look different. You will be surprised, but color balance is not always the most helpful, because what happens a lot of times is colors are actually oversaturated, and this doesn't have the ability to desaturate a color. So in this case, I'm going to hit cancel, and I'm going to actually use hue saturation, which is image, adjustments, and hue saturation. And this is actually my favorite thing to adjust colors with. The color that I don't like is red, so I'm going to go to red. And in this case, I'm just going to deselect a little red out. So you can see I'm sucking that red out. I'm just going to do a little bit of it, maybe 10. If I wanted to shift the color, I could do that. I could make it a little bit more yellow. But in this case, what I really want to do is just desaturate it because it's just a little bit oversaturated red. That is a selective adjustment because I made a selection. I'm going to hit OK. And just like that, I'm done. So I'm done toning this image. But one thing that people are going to run into and that I see with beginning students is they don't really know what an image should look like when it's too contrasty. when it's too red, when it's too black, when it's too white. That's where this info panel is going to be helpful. My monitor is calibrated, so what I see is exactly what I'm going to get. Not everybody, and I'm assuming most people who are just getting into this are not going to have it. So that's where this info panel comes in. So a white person with this complexion is going to need to have the brightness of their face somewhere between 20 and 25%. We're at 26%, that's going to be helpful. You'll also notice in the red, green, and blue, the numbers are 216, 178, 160. If all the numbers were the same, meaning if they were 178, 178, 178, that would be a true neutral gray. It takes a while to learn what these numbers mean, but once you do, you can kind of get an idea if you have a cast. So I can go to this rug where it's kind of like a warmish red brown. Notice that my numbers are 204, 204, 209. So this image has a little bit of yellow in it, and that's it in that color, meaning that this is pretty well toned in this area. It takes a while to get used to what numbers should be where. It helps if you can print stuff out because you can look at it and print it out and see if it's dark or light and then read the values. And then when they print, you kind of get an idea of where they should be. I go into this in my longer tutorial videos, so if that's something that you like, feel free to take a look at those. But that's what I'm using the info palette for, and I really do use it. After 25, 30 years of using Photoshop, I still use the info palette. Once we've got this done here, we can crop it and size it. So I can go to that crop tool. In this case, I'm going to just go up here to the width, height, and resolution. I'm going to just make this a ratio, which is 2:3, which is the natural ratio. Now in this case, it's vertical. If I want it to be horizontal, you can go to these little flip-flop arrows and it will flip them the other way. And so I can come in and crop a little bit off if I want. I can hit return. Now remember, that just changed the ratio. To actually size this image, I need to physically go in there and do that, either by selecting width, height, or resolution, or the way I usually do it is just go into image size and give it a number. So in this case, because I don't really care what the height is, if I just want to make this 2000 pixels, whoops, I can hit 2000, it's in pixels. It's going to automatically give me the correct height. I can hit OK, and it's going to resize it. I'm going to hit Command 0. Remember, the next step, we want to be at 100%, which was Command 1. So I can hit Command 1. This shows my image at 100%. Depending on the resolution of your screen, this might be much larger. I have a high resolution screen. Then we're going to sharpen. So we'll go up to Filter, Sharpen, Smart Sharpen. In a smaller image like this, I'm going to do it smaller. So I'm going to do about 30 to 35%. So we'll do, see if I can get that number close. That's pretty good. We'll go ahead and hit OK. That's going to sharpen our image. We're going to go to File, Save as a Copy. I'll just call her Woman. We don't want a PSD, which is a Photoshop file. We want to make that a JPEG. We're going to go ahead and hit Save. 11 is good. We want baseline standard. We hit OK. And just like that, you've saved your image output and you can upload this to Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever you want. And that's the basic process of using Photoshop. So you can see it's not overly complicated, but it does take time, and it's helpful if you have somebody that knows how to use the program, because what you think looks good doesn't always look good to the trained eye. So one thing that I've done is a lot of times people are working in Photoshop and they run into problems, and in the comment section, they leave me a comment, but I don't understand or I can't tell what it is. And usually the issue is I need to see what you're doing, and it makes it really easy for me to tell you what you're doing wrong. So what I've done, and we'll go on over here to my browser, is I've created this Facebook page. And the only reason is because you can easily upload images or videos to it, and it allows me to see what you're doing. And that way I can help you. Also, as you're toning an image, you can just go ahead and post it on here and ask me what you think. And I might tell you it looks good. I might say brighten this area or darken this area. And that's a quick, easy way for you to learn whether what you're doing is accurate or not accurate. So my suggestion is, before you jump on to other aspects of Photoshop, is to tone a large variety of images. Just tone an image after an image after an image until you get good and efficient at it, and then move on to the more complicated aspects of Photoshop. Well, that's it for this video. If you have any comments or questions, you can leave those below. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you found this video helpful, and don't forget to subscribe.